not over, Neil.
It's not over till the fat lady sings.
No, it's not over. The COVID's going to make it.
Oh, Jesus. It's going to make it.
Yeah.
We're going to make it against the COVID, or the COVID's going to defeat us all and wipe us out?
It's what I mean is that it's not over.
It's not over.
In case you think it's over, it's not over.
I thought we'd get vaccinated and then go back to normal.
A lot of people think it's over.
That's
but
what
it's
they
not
said
over.
would happen.
Well, that's not what they're saying now. Just put up that link I just sent you, Scotty. Take it from some dude named Van Tam. He's England's #2 medical officer, and he has a problem. A couple of days ago, too many people think the pandemic is over, which is the impression I get as well. That there's a lot of people, at least where we are, a lot of people, taking
Acting a bit normal.
taking a bit of a lax attitude to the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is a pandemic. We are in pandemia, and
You've seen less masks. and
less
whatnot.
mask people. Even in restaurants and stuff, where supposedly some kind of proof of vaccination is needed. More and more people not bothering. Restaurants not bothering. People being relaxed about masks and all that kind of stuff.
And not talking about it. They just don't talk about the thing.
Yeah,
If they can avoid it.
Just put up that article again, Scotty. In the first paragraph, England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer said Wednesday that too many people believe the pandemic is over. This is a bad thing. There's too many people not living in fear anymore. And he says the UK's very high coronavirus rates and rising deaths mean that there are hard months to come in the winter. That's a good prediction for a Deputy Chief Medical Officer to make, whose job depends on there being some kind of a health crisis. And his position and his...
You'd like to think his job depends on the population just being healthy.
No, crisis.
No.
You never let a
Crisis.
crisis go to waste. That's what government's for. He's part of the government, effectively, obviously. So all governments, like we've been saying over and over and over again, and I mean, I'm not talking about ordinary people or people who would watch the show or people who are woke, who are awake.
Awake, not...
Sorry, or who are awake. Not the woke people. What the opposite of woke.
That's why they call them woke, because they're such
Because they're not woke at all.
cross-eyed version of woke.
Right.
though.
But there's so many people can't get it into their heads, and it's the foundational problem behind all of this, everything that has been going on for the past 18 months, plus even going back to all sorts of issues and problems that have beset the planet in terms of wars and all that kind of stuff, and chaos and terrorism. People have a really hard time accepting a very, very simple concept, which is that their government are not honest brokers. Of course, people will accept that, of course, there can be corruption in politics and all that kind of stuff, but there's a limit to where they'll go with that, despite the fact that, the evidence in front of them suggests that, for them there really isn't a limit, there isn't a line, it's whatever is expedient in the moment in terms of maintaining their positions of power and control over the population. And like I've said to you, not that I was telling you this, but I was just saying it, is that a government's job is not to care for people, a government's job is to control people. And that has always been the way. And that very simple concept is really hard for a lot of people to actually get into their heads. It's like there's a block, they just don't, you get the sense that they don't want to believe that. It's not that there's no evidence for them to believe that, it's that they don't want to. So the evidence can go take a hike. They're going to go with the plausible, comfortable narrative, which is that governments care about us. I trust my government. And they say that from the position of not having any other option but to trust their government.
Yeah.
Well, I think they don't. Well, I suppose they don't, depending on the person. But
that's one aspect of it. It's real and it's true and it's driven us nuts the last 2 years, okay?
yeah,
But isn't the other aspect of what we said before that, which is that you notice that people are getting slack. They're not behaving as scared as they ought, apparently,
well,
for
that's
the government.
that's a kind of slow
That's a
drift.
kind of an unconscious... You notice that people will, as much as they don't criticize maybe as much as we would like them to,
Right.
they also kind of just naturally slip away from...
yeah.
They have to be forced back every time.
Well, which is
The natural drift kicks
right,
back in.
which is the attitude the government takes, is that the people always have to be pushed, nudged, to use a
Nudge
popular
theory.
term, nudge theory, to push people in a particular direction. Now the question is that direction for your benefit, or is it for the benefit of politicians, power-hungry people? I would say the reasonable conclusion is that it's for their benefit, not for your benefit. So yeah, but anyway, this guy says, yeah, hard months to come in winter. Of course, whatever, big deal. There's always hard months to come in every winter when viruses are circulating and people who are vulnerable to viruses slip off this mortal coil. And it's always been accepted as just a part of life, but no longer. March 2020 changed all that. It changed the definition of a pandemic. It changed the definition of what vaccinated means. It pretty much dumped out the 100-year-old, very useful and reliable concept of herd immunity. Lots of things got dumped out in March 2020 to the detriment of the population, obviously. And a lot of things were instituted. Lockdowns. Everybody knows what lockdown is now.
Despite that British minister's dismay, disapproval, would you say that it's been
fairly successful?
Fairly successful. I was
Yes.
going to say wildly successful
Yeah.
from their point of view.
Yeah. I mean, people are slipping, like you said, in terms of not taking the pandemic. And as this guy and other government figures are concerned about that people aren't taking it seriously enough anymore. And they're doing that because they're very right to not take it seriously. The evidence before their eyes is that there's nothing really serious to stop them from living normal lives. But governments don't want you to live a normal life. They've put a lot of effort into conditioning people in this way. And they're not going to let it go, right? They're just going to drop the ball on that one, right? And obviously, as we've talked about in previous shows, they're kind of segueing into climate disaster and, so lockdowns. We heard that right not long after the beginning or after maybe last summer, whatever, people talking about lockdowns would be useful to protect the climate, protect the planet, to stave off climate change. Let's have permanent lockdowns until we fix the planet. It's just bizarre, it all points to an agenda behind the scenes, somewhere in positions of power, to remake the world in a particular way, and the details of it are pretty scary in terms of what they plan or what they want to do. It's massively reckless in terms of social cohesion and the economy and social structure, but that's the thing. People won't go there with that idea. It's just too difficult for them to accept the idea that governments would be so malevolent. Yeah, they're a bit malevolent, but not so malevolent,
Yeah.
Well,
the thing is, if media campaigns, we know, if it's sustained enough, will work, at least in the short term. You just say, even if it's later shown to be the opposite to reality, if it's hit over and over and over and over and over again, it's accepted as truth, at least for a while.
Right.
But something as sustained as this over years and growing, increasing in intensity, I think, true polling, like the one we mentioned last week, where maybe it was just Americans who were polled, of all these government issues or issues that are going on at the moment, social issues, economic, whatever, international, where do you rank them on importance and what you want government to act on? And like of 15 categories, climate change was last.
Yep.
So that's what to really think, maybe when it's a sober moment. But at the same time, I don't want to overstate it either. Like, there's also a risk of us talking about them always talking about COP26 and climate change and doomsday and stuff. They're projecting what they wishfully think or what they wish to see others think, as many as possible. And how many of the billions on this planet are they really taking along with them? How much of an effect do they have,
I think they don't really care. I don't think they plan to take a lot of people along with them. I think their goal or their agenda is to keep people in a state of fear and keep them controlled in that way. So a lot of people they hear all the time about climate change and how it's a danger and stuff, and they'll give lip service to it, but they don't really look into it. They don't really care that much about it. It started a long time ago, obviously, but and people have been, a lot of people out there have been recycling and and helping the planet for a very long time. So it's been a long process of conditioning people to think in those terms of, we're in danger.
And the ozone hole in the
Clock is
90s.
ticking, the ozone hole, all that kind of stuff, But they have an agenda, they're pushing ahead with it, and they just want to keep people on song essentially, and keep a certain narrative at the forefront of people's minds, so that the average person just has canned responses, news bites that they pick up. They want those canned news responses when they talk about it to be, well, from the news, right? What government wants them to say and wants them to think about it. And no other voices are really allowed or accepted in the dominant narrative, right? They're, as we've seen, they're censored, they're removed from the airwaves to the greatest extent possible. And it's a real division, it's dividing people. The ones who can see and can think for themselves will seek out those alternative sources of news and information, and they'll go with it. And as long as they're still available, then okay. But even if they were all removed, people would still hold to that idea that they have of, this is all bullshit. The government is lying. It's manipulating. It's trying to control us through fear. And the vast majority, and I think it is significant majority of the rest of the population will just go along with always what the government says, So the lines have been drawn, There's a division has already happened quite a long time ago, and it maybe happened it started with the birth of every single person, It's either in people to see it or it's not, And we see that ourselves very directly with people we know and stuff, So, but just on his, getting back to that second chief medical officer person in the UK, Van Tam, just go to Euromomo there. It's just, anybody can go to Euromomo. It's basically a database of deaths, specifically in relation to COVID, but also deaths in general. And this is deaths in general. If you just scroll down to excess mortality, the heading excess mortality, it's like the line graphs. Yeah, next one right there. Excess mortality. This is up to date up to week, whatever it is, 43 that we're in or something. As you see there, that's all ages. If you scroll past there's 3 lines, right? There's a baseline, and then there's 3 lines for the past 3 years. Grey line, 2019, dark blue line, 2020, light blue line, 2021. 0 to 14 years. And the interesting ones are...
The next one.
15 to 44 years. So light blue line is this year. Weekly deaths on average, weekly deaths week by week have reached higher levels at this point, significantly higher levels than at any point in 2020. That's for 15 to 44 year olds. 45 to 64 year olds, same deal, a little bit lower, but still higher than last year. And even 65 to 74 year olds, it's not that much lower than the highest it was last year. Now, this is obviously in the context of majority of all of these people in these age groups having been already vaccinated. So you have greater number of excess mortality, excess deaths this year at this point than there was last year, particularly among the 15 to 44 year olds, 45 and to 64 year olds, i.e. those people who were not really at any risk from coronavirus, but apparently this year something has put them at risk and has caused a significant excess number of deaths compared to last year.
Yeah, I heard Alex Berenson say in that age category, more broadly, he says below 50.
Yeah,
it's up over, it's like 50% up this year than last year in both Europe and the United States.
Yeah, the same case in the US. Yeah, this is just all European countries, but it's indicative of most of all of the Western world, effectively.
Yeah.
I mean, there'd be differences in different other parts of the world that have also rolled out vaccine mandates, let's call them, because that's what they are, forcing vaccination on people. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's some graphs for you from an official EU agency that's showing that in the presence of, in most countries, you're talking 70-80% of the people vaccinated. This is what you see: significantly more excess deaths among middle-age group, probably from 15 years basically up to 64 years. Significant number of excess mortality in the presence of vaccination against COVID. More people are dying this year in those age groups having been vaccinated than were dying last year throughout the entire raging pandemic. So there you go. But again,
I've seen that spun hard to say that, well, we opened up too early. We went back to normal too early.
But vaccination protects you.
Not enough. I don't know. They're either not talking about that.
Well, also, I mean, you can look at this website yourself and any other website that shows this kind of data. Last year and this year, the number of excess deaths anywhere in the world were not remarkable. This is effectively, it is that bad word, scamdemic. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to suggest, to call it a pandemic. But again, they changed the definition of vaccine and they changed the definition of pandemic, right? So they reduced it way down. I mean, for most people, pandemic should conjure up images or ideas of significant large amounts of death and that kind of stuff. But really, there was nothing remarkable over, you go back 10, 15 years and look at it, and it's, it's dependent on the country or whatever, but it's barely higher than previous years. Bad flu seasons, for example. Mm-hmm. The whole thing is a joke, and I mean, and you can say that, and people are afraid to just come out and say that. But if you look at the totality of data, you can marshal all the data and try and make your case, or you can just call it what it is. Maybe cite some data, whatever. But the bottom line is the totality of all the data, not just actual numbers and all that kind of stuff, but in terms of what has happened over the past year and the way that has been managed and the messaging around it and all that kind of stuff, the fear-based messaging, the obvious attempt to coerce people to be afraid in the absence of something really for them to be afraid. You put it all together and it's been a joke, really has been a joke. And unless you've been looking at it in that way and looking at that data and looking at that information, I suppose you're going to believe what the government says, but it's horrible to think that you just always, anybody would always just believe whatever the government says and not what's in front of them.
Not only that, but they'll go to bat for the government.
Yeah, of course.
Before coming on air, I saw one Guardian lead story citing a joint Israeli-Swedish study, which claimed that all-cause deaths over the last year and a half are massively underestimated. So the official COVID death toll is something like 5-6 million. They're saying it's more like 16-20 million. And they say that that's because countries like Russia and elsewhere in Eastern Europe are not reporting correctly because they're massively downplaying. They're not on board properly like we are. We writing for the Guardian. Yeah. That people, it's bizarre because they're coming at it from a whole different premise. Their premise is there's a raging pandemic out there and no one wants to talk about it because it scares them. And therefore it's actually worse than where have these people been? Obviously the governments and their colleagues in media have jumped on every opportunity. We know they've grasped at straws all over the place because how many cases have there been where they became notorious headline cases? Student goes to party in Texas, dies from COVID when he broke lockdown rules or something like that. Last words on his deathbed were, I wish I hadn't done that. You later hear it's a totally hearsay. It's fake. There's no guy, there's no name, there's no person someone who is a senior-ish in the hospital or in medical services, maybe in the government in the US, just invented the story out of whole cloth. I think in one case, one person was actually challenged back on it. She said, well, whether it's true or not, the point is we have to get the message out that this is serious. It's okay for me to lie and to make up shit about this pandemic because I still imagine, based on my assumptions, that there is a raging pandemic behind all of it. We can't quite see it, she says. Maybe it's because people don't want to see it. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
They're eyes wide shut and going beyond government messaging. You see that with the criticism from the left of the British government in general this last 18 months. Oh, Boris, he messed up the whole thing. We could have saved hundreds of thousands of lives if only he had been usually harsher, more lockdown, longer, punish people. It's pretty frightening that kind of mentality exists. And what it means is that it could have been worse. The lockdowns could have been worse in the punitive, total nature of the lockdown. There was still space for them to go further because government isn't like on the far outer edges of extremity. There are others who are always propelling it to go further. Believe it or not, they actually find a more laissez-faire middle ground than what ends up we look at it and we say, well, that's still totally out of whack with reality in general. It's too extreme. I'm not suggesting that that's not the case, but keep in mind there are always these forces working on government to go further. You know.
Yeah, it's hard to, I don't know. It's hard to justify it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you can have, I don't know. People can have a look at this. It's you can spin it any way you want. You know what I mean? I mean, and that's the whole thing. It's been about spin. You know what I mean? And fear, like we talked about in previous shows about how UK and other government scientists, behavioral scientists, were in rooms plotting how to scare the crap out of people as much as possible, and in that way implant in their minds the idea that they were in a deadly pandemic, and that people were dying all over the place and that kind of stuff, despite the fact that people couldn't see anybody dying all over the place. They were being told that this is what was happening, and it's all about fear, right?
As if you've got it.
Yeah, if you just look at that, that's the JAMA network. Just go into the graph. This is number of deaths for leading cause of death, US 2015 to 2020. You've got total number of deaths there, and the average year in the UK or in the US, 2.9 million people. That's obviously main deaths remain the highest. The leading cause of deaths remained the same: heart disease, cancer. Number 3, there's COVID. 2020, 345,000 people, so about half the number of people who died from heart disease. The thing is, there's a list of things that kill people every year. And last year, supposedly COVID, even allowing, not talking about how they may have manipulated data to show that COVID was the cause of death when it was probably something else, because the vast majority of people who died from COVID had serious comorbidities. So a lot of those 345,000 deaths in the US last year should have been shunted into cancer and heart disease and stroke.
Heart disease, yeah, myocarditis.
Yeah. So, but still, it doesn't really stand out. Do you know what I mean? It's just another cause of death. And are you really going to wreck the global economy? Are you going to shut everything down over something like that? Over, something that's somewhere in the range of 10% of overall deaths every year. This is the official figures in the US. 10% of deaths every year from COVID. You're going to shut down for that one illness.
It doesn't add up. But shut it down they have, in part or for a while there, in full, at least in the first lockdown last year.
Mm-hmm.
Now
they're going for the kids.
They're going for the kids. And on the climate front, that's also the take-home action. The take-home thing you're supposed to get from it, in general, is to shut it all down.
Yeah.
We got to put a break on this thing. Well, on what thing? Well, everything. On life.
Isn't it kind of interesting, though,
Lockdown.
that's what they did with COVID, that they shut down the economy for COVID, and that's what we've been talking about for
It's the
for
same
many years.
thing, essentially, that they want in both issues.
Camps, yeah. Just on the kids thing, I just want to make this point. I hope most people know it. There's heartening, news about data about the numbers of people who plan to allow their kids, these are under 12 or very young kids, to be vaccinated. There's a lot of people, maybe you see reports of only 30% of parents are saying that they would get their kids vaccinated with an mRNA vaccine against COVID. But that doesn't stop Pfizer and all of the media and governments and all really pushing hard on trying to convince people, parents and children, even directly to children, to try and get the kids to put pressure on parents so they can get their vaccine. I want my vaccine.
Or just to ignore the parents.
The CDC and Pfizer said that I need my vaccine, so I'm going to go and get my vaccine at 6, 7, 8 years old. Just play the MP4, Scotty. This is, well, you'll see.
Ready to fight COVID. All of us want to be superheroes, and the most important heroes are those that help others. This year, thousands of kids like us around the world joined the COVID-19 vaccine trial. Kid power. And when they did, they became all superheroes. To all the kids who volunteered, we'd like to say, thank you! Thank you! Thank you for sharing your superpowers of courage, trying new things,
the ability to save people,
the power to help people,
helping not just yourself, but many other kids.
to not be scared, be strong, super brave,
Bravery and courage.
a superhero shot, helping everybody, fight coronavirus and help others. You're helping the whole entire world. Thank you. You are all superheroes.
Thank you!
Thank you, superheroes. Thank you. You're awesome.
Pfizer loves your children.
Of course, what it tells you is that their parents,
Ready to fight COVID.
what that actually tells you is that they're just playing what their parents believe about
Yeah,
the world.
well,
Superheroes and stuff like that. They're, bless them, they're just kids, but their parents think like that. They have parents who are children.
Yeah. And yeah, of course, yeah. And it's kind of disgusting because, as everybody knows and no one disagrees with, if you just throw up the COVID and kids JPEGs 1 and 2, this is New York Times, maybe a couple of months ago, it was well known a couple of months ago, COVID and age. An unvaccinated child is at less risk of serious COVID illness than a vaccinated 7-year-old. And then the second one is just from the same article. The more encouraging half of the story is on the other end of the age spectrum. For children without a serious medical condition, the danger of severe COVID is so low as to be difficult to quantify, i.e. it's zero. They have zero risk of any kind of severe illness as a result of this virus. And yet, Pfizer puts out this kind of manipulative campaign that's just one of many, and governments obviously are pushing as well. And I've looked it up to try and find an explanation from anywhere, any official source, as to why children need to be vaccinated. And there is no reason. It's to get back to normal. They make some reference to, some kids have had, they only have tiny figures to show certain amount of kids, but it's really, if you look at it, they put it in a certain context, but if you look at it in the proper context, it's nothing. It's basically zero. Kids are effectively immune to this virus, and yet there's a massive, the FDA just recently approved mRNA Pfizer shot for children when they don't need it. So, that fact alone should raise serious questions about the integrity of the people pushing this whole agenda. And that should naturally lead you into questioning all the rest of it. And it's very easy to do. It's not hard. But again, we come back to that problem of this weird psychological, emotional block that people have against accepting the fact that this all could have been a big ruse, a big scam for some ulterior motive. And it's like, have people never come across a ruse or a scam or a horror of horrors conspiracy before? Like the idea of I know, as we know, the CIA made up the term conspiracy theory like decades ago, specifically in order to ridicule people for suggesting that there could be any kind of a plot or any kind of a nefarious agenda among people in positions of power, vis-a-vis towards the population.
Yeah.
And people today, maybe they bought that a long time ago, but they know as well, I think, because you see it in ordinary people. I don't think people are being conditioned to be this way. I think that a lot of people are naturally this way, where they simply can't accept the idea that the people on whom they depend, or they believe that they depend for their security and, daily sustenance, whatever, to keep society together, that they depend on, like children depend on parents, they cannot believe that those people, they will not believe, are emotionally unable to believe that those people could be in any way malintended towards them. And if that's the case, then forget about it. The government can do whatever it wants And if it's got a half bullshit plausible narrative, then people will accept it. People will eat it up because they want to believe. They want to believe that government is good, and it doesn't matter how much evidence.
They are capable of believing it in specific instructed circumstances. So there was an example that comes to mind, a series of terrorist attacks in Russia over the last 10 years, usually at train stations and metro bombings, maybe in Moscow, Petersburg, elsewhere. And I remember reading a BBC article that gave, it made the suggestion that, well, this is Putin's Russia. So, and he's got to be able to clamp down now on stuff in Russia. So we
They're
should
voicing
keep
a
open
conspiracy
the
theory.
possibility now that
They're voicing
the
a
Russians-
hardcore conspiracy theory right there, but it only applies to other governments,
Yeah.
to the enemy, to the other, to
To
the
the
bad
other,
people.
to-
It'll happen in
it
North
has to
Korea.
Russia and in the United States, the GOP especially under Trump, can be engaged in conspiracy.
Right.
Grand conspiracy. They framed Trump because of the January 6th insurrection as the commander-in-chief of a terrorist organization.
Right.
It's conspiring
Which
together to
implies a serious
overthrow
conspiracy,
the proper order in this
Right.
country. So they do.
So what happens just doesn't, we don't do it, is the idea. That they, quote unquote, they say. They never do it. The ones who are always pointing out the conspiracies are never engaged in conspiracy themselves, or not always, but when they would suggest that a conspiracy can exist in certain places in Russia or amongst in the Trump campaign or in the Trump administration, the very fact that they're pointing it out, they're pointing the finger, means that they would, of course, never do it themselves, right? They would never be a party to it.
Yeah, maybe it's just simply a matter of numbers. There has to be sufficient consonance of media voice saying something or framing something a certain way.
Yeah. Once you reach a certain threshold, then that's the truth.
Then that's the truth. They don't see it this way, but it's as if it may as well be the word of God. And they make no distinction between their own voice and its voice. People joke, they meme this up the wazoo, the whole NPC thing.
Right.
We're all speaking in unison with whatever CNN just said.
Yeah.
It's a joke, but it's also there's something real to this. I don't understand it exactly. Is it just simply the amount of media barrage and it reaches a threshold? Is there something subliminal within specific messaging? That somehow there are signals that are picked up unconsciously by some people.
There has to be fertile ground for those types of signals to be picked up, though. They have to be willing to absorb that kind of, like you call it, a plausible narrative or a comfortable narrative about the world. And people need somebody to be in control. It's okay if you identify someone as the evil one or the one who's engaged in a conspiracy to overthrow the government or to carry out terrorist attacks in Russia or something like that, as long as we have our good guys on this side, right? So ultimately, you can't trash the whole lot of them, because somebody has to be the good guy, right? But talking about...
And the good guy they've chosen is the bloody CIA.
Yeah, exactly. Ultimately, it's the CIA. And but talking about COVID propaganda, there's a wonderful kind of not tongue-in-cheek, but kind of somewhat funny advertisement in Australia.
Yeah, it's a lot better than the psycho ones they were doing.
Yeah, but still, I found it quite disgusting all the same.
Okay.
It's the Twitter Cookie Cat 7. Just get a load of this. It's obviously jokey, but it's got a serious message.
You're having a reaction. You're gonna be fine. Hold still.
Wait, what brand EpiPen is that?
I don't know.
What's in it?
Medicine.
Medicine? How long is it research for?
I don't know.
What are the stats from Europe?
You could die.
What does Joe Rogan say? Call Joe.
We don't question the science when our life depends on it. So why question it when millions of lives depend on it? Science has our backs. Get the vax.
We don't question the
Very
science when our lives depend on it. But that's what's being questioned. Is the point that they're missing there. What's being questioned is whether or not our lives depend on it. So there's obviously an assumption there. It's just it's massively biased. Obviously, it's a joke to be presenting it as something that would convince people, at least people who would think a little bit, because it's clearly biased. It starts with the presumption that everyone's lives depend, or millions of people's lives depend on them getting a vaccine against COVID, which is not true, has not been proven. And, you know, obviously trashing, you know, Call Joe, obviously a little dig at ivermectin and alternative treatments for COVID. So, yeah, it's just it's a funny commercial, but it's
insidious.
It's insidious, and it's sending that same message of just believe, basically.
Just believe. Well, my comeback to them would be, should we just believe, as thousands of medical workers, including doctors, did in hospitals at the beginning of this, by taking unnecessarily tens of thousands of people and shoving ventilators on them and killing them.
Yeah.
Which pretty much came to a halt. We don't know. It came to a halt in a big way when somebody stood up and started to question the science on that.
Yeah.
So your science it works both ways. Your science can be killing people because you're ignorant.
Yeah, but just to go through it before we move on to the cop out. Just throw up. We have a bunch of them here. Just keep in mind that Euromomograph, and obviously it's similar in the US in terms of excess deaths, excess mortality this year compared to last year. More people dying this year compared to last year. Amongst that middle age group from, say, 15 years old up to 60 years old, and why that would be in the context of a mass vaccination campaign. We shouldn't be able to blame it on COVID, right? The vaccines are protecting everybody from COVID. Last year we didn't have the vaccines. That's why there were deaths, a certain amount of excess deaths last year. This year there should be fewer excess deaths, at least compared to last year, because last year, like, was COVID, no vaccines. This year, vaccines against COVID deaths should be lower, but they're not, they're higher. So keep that in mind when we just look at some of these links. We can start off with the pictures or whatever, but we'll just scoot through them. So these are, you know, the ones that actually get into the media because the local media picked up on them, or the families brought it to the attention or whatever. So that's Utah woman, 39, dies 4 days after second dose of Pfizer vaccine. Autopsy ordered. It'll be interesting to see where the autopsy goes. Next, Draper teenager hospitalized with blood clots after COVID-19 vaccine shot. Next, these are from earlier this year. Michigan boy dies 3 days after getting Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. CDC is investigating. Yeah, sure they are. Next. 15-year-old's death after getting vaccinated raises concern about VERS. Unverified reports claim 15-year-old Colorado boy died after getting vaccine. Next.
Concerns about VERS, not concerns about the vaccine.
Yeah. Healthy
what
boy
a twist.
is over the UK. Healthy boy 13 dies after suddenly in his sleep 3 days after getting second dose of Pfizer vaccine. Yay, Pfizer. Next. Model dies after receiving COVID vaccine. That was actually in Cyprus. We have some links in, I think, after that. Is that maybe the last picture, or is there more pictures? Okay,
There is enormous
links.
social...
This was on Tucker Carlson brought it up. Mother says athlete's son developed blood clots after COVID vaccine. We felt enormous pressure. No shit. There was massive pressure exerted. Manipulation, coercion. Next one. Teen boy dies a few days after receiving second COVID vaccine shot. The CDC panel just met this week to weigh vaccine risk to kids. Oops. Next. NCAA athlete hit with severe heart complication after COVID vaccine warns against vaccine mandates. I think that's the video we have, but you can just keep going. Student athlete's TikTok went viral after he developed myocarditis from the vaccine. Here's what experts want you to know. Don't listen to this. This is bad. This is bad for you to listen to. You should not listen to. That's what the experts want you to know. That vaccines are fine. Next. Francis Perron, 25-year-old University of Ottawa in Canada football player, dies shortly after football game. mandatory vaccines were required at the school.
I like how they put vaccines in quotes.
Yeah.
Good job.
Next. And there's, again, Singapore, actually, teen who had a heart attack after vaccine dose receives $225,000.
So they acknowledged
Yeah.
that. Right.
At least
they
that's,
paid out.
that's Singapore.
Well, of course.
Don't expect any
that's been
payouts
happening.
in the US.
Well, I think there might be, but
Maybe.
it's always going to be taxpayer money because the companies are immune from
Right.
any legal repercussions.
Or any more.
And there's just a few you grabbed today.
There's a few. You can do a search. You can. I think this is one of the guys. Yeah, that you can play a little bit of it maybe.
I'm in the
Who's the
hospital
TikTok guy?
right now with heart complications from the COVID-19 vaccine. And I want to inform as many people as I can about the risks from taking the vaccine that I wish someone would have told me. So I am a Division I student athlete with no prior health issues. And I got the second COVID shot Tuesday, and within 4 days, I have been diagnosed with myocarditis and was told that I probably won't be able to play my senior season now. It is a side effect from the COVID vaccine, and it's really not being reported or addressed, and it is a serious issue that we should all be informed about before making this decision.
Shut up.
It isn't
Take the
right
shot.
for people to be forced to take the
Oh,
vaccine
you're right, dude.
because there are actual side effects like this that could happen to you, and the NCAA should not mandate student athletes to get the vaccine because of what could happen to so many fellow student athletes, health issues, which has happened to me. Everyone should be informed of the
Okay.
side effects. And
Well,
So-
I have had all my vaccines, and I think he's an actor hired by Trump
Yeah, probably.
to
He's probably-
undermine this great nation.
Yeah, he's probably a Trump supporter. That's a level of discourse.
And there's a couple of other high-profile ones,
Well, there-
footballers in Europe.
That's not even including all of those ones. I
Right.
mean, none of them reported like kind of high level. You know.
Aguero, the
Yeah.
Barcelona striker.
Yeah, loads of them.
They didn't report it as...
No.
They just said he's going to miss the next third of the season while he
Yeah.
undergoes tests for possible heart complications.
During the summer, there were footballers who collapsed on the field.
Yeah.
In multiple cases, collapsed on the field while playing. Of course, it's covered up because if it's a fairly big club and stuff, they're not going to, because they're effectively linked into the government and the vaccine manufacturers and stuff. So there's pressure there to get them to shut up about it and stuff. But all of these cases happened over the summer, basically, say starting from like March, when younger people started getting it, all the way through. But everybody at this point, I think, who has gotten it, who is going to get it, has gotten it. So those cases, unless everybody starts getting a booster vaccine, then you may see a resurgence of these kind of cases. But all of these reports are basically from up until the end of the summer, basically, when people were still getting the vaccine. So it's a done deal at this point, and we'll never really know the full number of people who. And these are just serious cases. A lot of them are deaths, as you saw there, and a few of them are serious cases of myocarditis and blood clots. But there's many, many more cases of fairly serious adverse reactions. We're talking about tens, well, at the very least, officially tens of thousands. In the case of the VERS reporting system in the US, there's about 10,000 deaths from vaccines reported on the official government reporting website. 10,000 people have died as a result of after getting their vaccine. Of course, they quibble on that and say that doesn't mean that they died from the vaccine, just because they died afterwards, right? Yeah, well, it's something that should be looked at, I think. Anyway, that's where we are.
The UK government's on the verge of mandating third shot, the booster.
They're not on the verge of it. They're doing it. Well, mandating it, yeah. Well,
No,
they've already rolled
no
it out.
booster, no hassle-free foreign travel. Again, it was the first in. You want to be able to travel? Get the shot.
Well, that means they're gonna redefine what it means to be vaccinated, which they've already spoken about repeatedly. Is that 2 shots don't mean you're vaccinated anymore, or soon will not mean that you're vaccinated anymore. You'll need a third one for full vaccination coverage, and if you don't have full vaccination, then you're denied a lot of your civil liberties.
Yeah. They say they'll reimpose quarantine and testing for those who have refused third vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll just try to, we'll see how far they go with that. they just want to annoy the hell out of you initially, but it may eventually go mandatory. And after that, I mean, it's going to be mandatory annual shots, right? Most
Biannual
likely.
shots at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been rolling out the booster after 6 months. So if people get a booster now, they're going to need another one next March or April.
Did you see the critical paper in British Medical Journal?
Mm-hmm.
Got a little bit of media attention.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
COVID-19 researcher blows the whistle on data integrity issues in Pfizer's vaccine trial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There were dodgy protocols, basically. Not proper protocols around conducting the trial and reporting adverse events. Of course, but they say this was just it was kind of outsourced to an organization that was doing part of the trial. A small percentage of the trial was being conducted by this organization or whatever. But still, that was a mistake, right? To send it out to some kind of a third party organization that was conducting part of the trial for you. You want to keep it all in-house in Pfizer because you can be sure that there's not going to be any leaks from Pfizer. Although there have been to some extent, obviously, with the Project Veritas stuff. But, you have more control over it when it's all in-house, right? But yeah, that can be seen. Anybody with any sense would see that as
Rushing a
indicative.
vaccine to market.
Well, see it as indicative of what's going on in the larger trials being conducted by Pfizer itself, right?
Yeah.
In-house in Pfizer, when you outsource it to someone else, and you get a snapshot of what the overall trial conditions and protocols are like, and they're super dodgy, which is not surprising because it's all about money at the end of the day. And these pharmaceutical companies have a long track record of covering up negative effects of their drugs. I mean, anybody can look that up and look at the whole litany of pharma companies who have engaged in that kind of those kind of cover-ups over decades, really. And there's been massive payouts. All of them, well, not all of them, but the main players have all paid out billions of dollars to people who are negatively affected, had negative health effects on people. That took the drugs that these pharmaceutical companies approved, knowing that they would have these bad side effects, but cover them up. These are the same people making your vaccine. But just get it anyway because we all got the shit scared out of us by governments for the past 18 months, so it doesn't matter. And also, we don't look at that stuff anyway, and the vast majority of people don't pay any attention to anything, don't do their own research, don't pay any attention to anything important when it comes to their own health. They don't take responsibility for their own health, and they just pass it all off onto the government.
Yeah.
Government will take care of me. I trust the government. Why? Because I have to trust the government, because I won't take care of my own health. I won't have any interest in my own health, so I have to trust that the government is doing its best and is working in my best interest when it's approving vaccines or approving drugs, and that also the pharmaceutical companies who are making the drugs are all doing it in the interest of public health. It's got nothing to do with money. They're not just trying to, pump up the bottom line, and it's not about the shareholders and profits. It's all about public health. And if they spend billions of dollars researching a drug and it turns out that the drug is actually bad for people, it doesn't do what it's meant to do, they're definitely immediately going to admit that to everybody, just eat up that amount of research money that they pumped into it and start again, because it's all about public health. That's what's going to happen, right? And then the unicorns are going to come in, right? Floating across on clouds with bunny rabbits on their backs and kiss everybody on the head and administer unicorn juice so that everybody will be healthy forever.
Joe.
That's what happens
Well,
in that land.
A lot of people also just capitulate to fear.
That's
like
what
you
I said,
suggested
yeah.
a couple of shows ago,
Well, yeah.
where you explained that we should give people some allowance, even those who are saying that they're going along with it, that really they just want to be left alone. They're going along with fear and terror. But we know people who have articulated in the past that they're skeptical of vaccines in general.
Mm-hmm. But what are they going to do?
Of taking care of their own health. And then we met them again the last 18 months and they said, well, yeah, I've been vaccinated.
Yeah. Because I don't think, because I don't follow through my thinking, and it's all kind of fairly superficial. and generally speaking, I just go along to get along, and I hope that everything will turn out all right. I hope that the government is working in my best interest. I hope that medical or pharmaceutical companies are working in my best interest. I have to hope, because otherwise I'd have to look at it myself. I'd have to research myself. I'd have to ultimately take responsibility for my own health, and I just can't do that. So yeah, you can have sympathy for people because they don't have the time or the inclination to do that, and they're stuck. They're stuck in a bad marriage, basically, in an abusive relationship, and there's not much to be done about it, really, except see what happens. So
Angela Merkel is still in charge in Germany.
yeah,
Go away.
she the Fuhrer.
She's arguing for ban on unvaccinated in public spaces. This is from the Times this week. Merkel is pushing for severe restrictions for the unvaccinated. Some states have already begun introducing, quote, lockdown light measures for those who have declined the jab. In one region, they're effectively banned from indoor public spaces such as restaurants, cinemas, etc. And in another, they're only permitted to gather in small groups. I won't even mention the N word, but it's funny that Germany was not quite, they lag on the curve of pushing this. To her credit, Merkel didn't want to be up front and center leading, the Reichsmarch into lockdown land. But yeah, there they are. I thought maybe for a while that, there'd be more resistance in Germany, even among its elites, to all this. But it's probably more to do with international image, not to be seen as, invoking certain history. It's not all going one way, though. The other news this week is that the U.S. Appeals Court, I think doesn't matter where it is, right? It's an appeals court, 19th Circuit, blocked Biden's federal vaccine mandate.
Yep. And in Canada and Ontario, anyway, they rescinded the mandate for healthcare workers. Although it's kind of funny that they did that because there's already a mandate for everybody, whether you're a healthcare worker or not, which is basically if you don't get the vaccine, you can't travel. You can't get them in a lot of places. In most of the country, you can't fly. You can't get on a train or a bus. So
this is the insidious part of it, right? There is no, because they look at the entire array of what they've called privileges, which are really God-given human rights, but whatever, and they can withhold this a little bit here. They can push over here, Okay, fine, you've got your freedom there, but over here, we'll come and get you this way. If it's different, get you through your work. Or gets you through travel.
What
your
kind
kids
of
going to school?
What kind of mental gymnastics do you have to go through to not see that? How much does it have to build up? How much does government have to do before people start to recognize that they are being manipulated and corralled and pushed in a certain direction and in a direction and gaslighted? Over and over again. It comes back to the idea of the will to believe. I want to believe. I have to believe that that's not what's happening. It's like reality continues to intrude on these people's lives, and it's a testing of their ability to do those mental gymnastics to make it all seem positive when it's actually quite negative. And how good are you at spinning a negative into a positive? How much negative can you spin into positive, before the whole thing collapses, Just another thing that backs up what we were saying earlier on. This is from the US. It's from Michigan. ERs are swamped with seriously ill patients, although many don't have COVID. Yep. But shouldn't we find out what's wrong with those patients and make a vaccine and mandate it? Because those people are seriously ill.
And they're clogging up our hospitals.
And some of them are dying and they're clogging up our hospitals. Shouldn't we
Which was the whole rationale for getting into this.
Find out what's wrong with those people and make a vaccine. Have Pfizer make a vaccine to stop that happening. We have to stop that kind of thing from happening. That's what we learned over the past 18 months, that when hospitals are clogged up with anything, and if there's a spike and hospitals can't handle it and it's something that nobody's figured out, we need to figure it out and make a goddamn vaccine for it. There should be a vaccine for everything. There should be a vaccine to stop people going to hospital. Period. And from dying. Ever. Again. Assholes.
A vaccine against lying.
Well, that'd be a good one. Vaccine against being a lying sack of crap.
Force everyone to tell the truth.
Yeah.
Doesn't
A
work.
truth serum. Wonder Woman. That's our truth. What did she have? She had a kind of lasso of truth.
Don't look at me, Scotty.
We need Wonder Woman to come back.
Yeah, the golden lasso of
golden
truth.
lasso of truth. Yeah.
Yeah,
She could
something like that.
bust into Congress and throw it around Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and people like that, and everybody in the CIA. Yeah. So
Well,
what?
look,
What about Bojo?
it's all explained this week
By Bojo.
by Pete Buttigieg.
Pete Butt
Buttigieg.
Butt Gag.
Buttigieg.
Butt
Buttigieg.
Gag. Pete Butt Gag.
Let me give this to Scotty first.
Where is he? Who is he again?
The reason we're all getting vaccinated, he breaks it down nice and simple. He's now, can you believe he's in Biden's go? He's a U.S. Transportation Secretary.
Yes.
He's recently back from maternity leave.
Yeah, you have a baby.
Yeah, but he's a gay man,
His brother, his husband had a baby, not him.
I guess. Yeah. Anyway,
He's the dom, so his husband had the baby.
did you get that article?
Anyway,
This is what everybody getting vaccinated is all about. The U.S. Transportation Secretary admits that the U.S. supply chain issues won't end until the pandemic does.
no food until you get your vaccine.
That's what it sounds like. And this isn't the first time a Biden official
Yeah,
has said this.
the
Before there
deputy-
was
deputy
the,
treasury secretary.
yeah,
Secretary,
last
that
month.
Indian fella.
We thought at the time, is that a threat? But yeah, I don't know. I just don't know what to think of this because it's what it has. The air of it, the way we're reading
Here-
it, could be they're holding everyone hostage.
Well, do they even explain?
they
it?
have
Look-
that kind of control
Look
of
at
the
look at that first head. Look at that first line. U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg predicted on Sunday that supply chain issues plaguing multiple industries at the moment are going to continue as long as the coronavirus pandemic does. Explain how those two are linked.
So many people are sick from COVID-19 that
That's what's happening.
they're not working. Therefore, stuff's not getting made and shipped
Right.
and delivered tomorrow.
What about all the people walking off the job because they don't want to be vaccinated?
They're part of the problem.
How can they walk off the job for not being, but because they don't want to be forced to take a vaccination? How can they be part of the problem if they're healthy enough to walk off their job? They're not sick. They're not leaving their job because they're sick. They're leaving their job because they don't want to be vaccinated. But if you get vaccinated, it'll keep them healthy enough to stay at their job. But they want to stay at their job. They just don't want to be vaccinated.
Yeah, something like 4 million people left their jobs in August.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much higher that is against background rates, but it sounded huge. Can you play Buttigieg there? He's talking to that total sellout, Chris Wallace from Fox News.
Let's talk about the backups in the supply chain. Since the president announced 2 weeks ago that the Port of Los Angeles was going to 24/7 operations, the number of container ships waiting offshore has not gone down. It's gone up from 56 to 77. One day last week, a terminal pier in Long Beach announced 2,000 appointments for truckers went unused. Goldman Sachs says that port congestion is not going to ease until the second half of next year.
Yeah, there are definitely going to continue to be issues, especially as long as the pandemic continues, right?
Okay.
That's all there is to it. Okay.
There's going to be issues as long as the pandemic continues. He's implying or stating directly that there being a shortage of truckers or shortage of manpower, woman power, whatever power, to ship containers from ports. That's obviously the supply chain problem, right? Or part of the supply chain problem anyway, and getting it to end users.
Labor shortage.
Getting it to retail. But has anybody looked at the labor shortage and what's actually, if the labor shortage is people being sick? And what is causing their sickness in the context of most people being vaccinated?
But obviously,
they don't go into that, obviously.
They're not sick. They didn't actually play his answer there in that short video. But anyway, he says, for the very short term, there are steps we can take. In the medium term, again, at risk of repeating myself, so he apparently said it elsewhere. If we really want to see all these disruptions to the movement of goods, if we want to see these disruptions end, we've got to end the pandemic. And that's what getting everybody vaccinated is all about.
So if there are more serious supply chain problems and people, empty stores, empty grocery stores, all that kind of stuff, people can't get products they want, they're going to blame it on a lack of vaccination uptake. At least in the US, they might be able to do that to some extent because,
Yeah.
But there's plenty of countries where you can't do that because the vast majority of people in many countries are actually vaccinated. Is it because they haven't taken their booster? Is it because we don't know why? Like in that previous article I just put up there, a lot of people are actually sick in hospitals, filling up ER rooms, and we don't know why because most of them are not actually COVID cases. It's something else. We don't know what that something else is.
Mystery short illnesses. Yeah, I do. It does make me want to leave open some play for deliberate
messing with the supply chain.
With supply chains.
Yeah, that
like
can
stuff,
happen, obviously.
Wouldn't surprise me the least. Because you know what they say in politics, never let Rahm Emanuel, never let a good crisis go to waste. So this crisis comes up. It's genuinely a supply chain issue resulting from the lockdowns, not so much the so-called pandemic. And then, well, how can we use this? How can we nudge people with this?
Rahm Emanuel was the White House chief of staff under Bush in 2008, late under Bush. Actually,
wasn't he Obama's chief of staff?
Oh, November, 2008?
Because he was a Chicago Democrat.
Okay, November 19, that was when he was coming in, yeah. He said, you never want a serious crisis go to waste. And what I mean by that is it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before. Do what exactly?
Hold a country hostage.
Well, have lots of fun. Get your power jollies. What about there was some political...
Yeah, there's a third Biden official saying something similar. Let me just send this over here. NBC News, employee vaccine mandate is key to GDP, says Biden economic advisor Jared Bernstein. What the hell? You see, from your first guess would be, okay, so if everyone gets vaccinated, economic GDP will be healthier. That's apparently what he's trying to claim.
You know that just recently, in the last day or two, that Biden's mandate for mandating businesses with over 100 employees to require vaccination by January 4th, that was put on hold by a federal judge.
Is that the story we mentioned earlier about an appeals court judge?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's been next because I think something like 27 states launched legal action against it. 27, so more than half of the US states launched legal action against them mandating, the government attempting to mandate vaccines for companies with more than 100 people by January 4th. They have to have it done or you'll be fired or something. Speaking of politics, what went on in the few elections of note in the US recently? Governor elections.
Yeah, so it's not only every 2 years, but every year there's something going on. As it happens, Virginia and New Jersey have elections for governor
right
every odd year.
Yeah.
So the big surprise was in Virginia, where a kind of rookie governor candidate for the Republican Party won. But that wasn't the only one. People heard about that. And I love the fact that his lieutenant governor on the same ticket as him is a black woman, a U.S. military vet, a proud gun owner, you know.
Well, this is...
And just stood there and, you know, said, here I am. I'm Republican.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to be...
Because I'm black.
But I am.
Yeah.
Which just trounces the entire basis of
Virginia, Biden won Virginia supposedly in last November, a year ago, by 10 points. And now in the governor election for the governors of that state, 1 year later, Republican wins by 2 points. So that's a 12-point swing in less than a year. That's obviously a commentary on Biden, where people in Virginia who all supposedly voted, you know, majority voted, significant majority voted for Biden last year. Suddenly now they want a Republican governor because Biden's they just woke up to the fact that he's Sleepy Joe and he's useless and they didn't know that before. Or is it...
The media's theory is that this is, quote, a referendum on Biden's presidency so far.
Of course, yeah. That's what they always say.
You know, the Green New Deal.
Does it call into question the possibility that the result in Virginia last year was not accurate? It always does. It always brings up those.
Well, Virginia
those
was one of those states that was a bit tardy.
Yeah.
Delivering its results.
Yeah.
Like 5 days tardy or more. Yeah. But that wasn't the only strange result. They had some small elections to state houses, either because somebody died or there's a vacancy, whatever, for whatever reason. Oh, well, I should first mention the other governor election was New Jersey. Now, there's been a long time, 3 or 4 times winner, Democrat there. He considered himself the kingpin of the state. He almost lost.
He almost lost. It was right down to the wire. Well, actually, in Virginia, Project Veritas, there's a little video here. You can just watch it. Project Veritas had somebody on the inside of that count in Virginia just last week. And here's an example of the kind of thing that apparently was going on.
Last year?
The presidential.
And did you register?
No, I wasn't registered either.
Are you registered now?
Oh, I never filled anything out, no.
Okay, then I can't see how you can vote because you're not registered.
Remember, I do remember him.
Okay.
Remember we was allowing anyone to come in?
We was allowing anybody to come in and they say
presidential.
Yeah, Dorney General just let us.
Okay. I'll let you fill out a ballot now. Whether or not it's going to be, they're going to count it, I don't know.
But I don't know if it works because I'm an Irish,
but
I'm an Irish citizen. I'm not.
It doesn't matter. I mean, you have some
doesn't
citizenship
matter.
here?
With the work visa, yeah.
Listen, we'll let you do it. They'll figure that out.
The brand new one, yeah. No much many new ones, just so you know.
So, you know, there you go. That was one thing that happened in, and obviously that's a Project Veritas journalist who's in there pretending to be an Irish citizen. And saying, go on, let me vote, will you? Go on. My great-great-grandfather came over here and...
went back to Ireland.
I went back
here I am
home,
now.
But, you know.
But there were some other gems that just... Seattle. Remember last year? Chav, whatever it is. CHOP.
Yeah.
The Seattle Autonomous Zone, you know, the summer of love, as the mayor said. All the shite that was going on in that city. Seattle elects Republican as city attorney over the Democratic candidate who was all for abolishing the police, which is the mantra that came out of those riots last year. So after all that, Seattle Democrat stronghold says, you know what, this has gone too fucking far. Yep. They elected a Republican. There's another one, a credible story. This is for a state Senate seat within New Jersey. A New Jersey truck driver who had a couple $1,000 in campaign contributions defeated another longtime senator, the leader of the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
He had been, the top Democrat senator in the New Jersey Senate, and he was ousted by a truck driver called Ed Durr.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, finally, another rookie Republican Mexican Mexican American, won a seat in a Texas seat, the San Antonio area, on building a wall. Total Trump stuff, protect the borders. Again, he had very little funding compared to the Texas Democrats who, quote, went all in, spending millions to try and defeat him. They lost. So there are a few samples there. Like either there's been a major shift, as the media is saying it, that they take the official counts from 2020 presidential election and they look at the results in these small examples a year later and they go, look at these swings. Wow, there's been a big shift against the Democrats in the last year. Or that was the state of play in 2020 already. And there's something fishy. It just further highlights suspicions are merited when it comes to the result of the presidential count.
You're not allowed to say that, though. So.
Okay, I retract that. It's just interesting.
It's interesting.
Okay. That's it, really. There was only a few elections. There was just, 2 governorships, a few House seats. Interesting.
What about Bojo?
Yeah, bloody hell, COP. COP is going on for 2 weeks. I thought it was 2 days. No, Rome G20 was 2 days. This event's 2 weeks. That's why there's 25,000 of them. It's a big hoo-ha. Yeah, it's still going. Let's listen to Bojo.
You know
he
what?
actually gave the speech.
Before we listen to Bojo, and before we leave that topic that we were just on, I want people to listen to an authority on who's that? Is that you?
What are you hearing?
Don't know. Anyway, listen to Big Bird.
It's been a while.
See what he's saying there? Don't listen to Joe Rogan. Listen to Big Bird. Read out what Big Bird's telling you to do there, Neil.
Oh, what, the first tweet?
Keep going. Yeah. Read them all. The first one, yeah.
I got the COVID-19 vaccine today. My wing is feeling a little sore, but it'll give my body an extra protective boost that keeps me and others healthy. Miss Erica Hill even said I've been getting vaccines since I was a little bird. I had no idea.
So, that's the final word from Big Bird. I just wanted to throw that in there. Don't listen. Joe Rogan, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Big Bird, he's your man, or he's your...
She's
your... I don't know. He's your avian point of reference.
Oh yeah, well they've been hitting cartoons programs.
Yeah. Well, again, it gets back
Paw
to the kids
Patrol,
thing.
Hitting them all over the place.
It's programming. It's
not
mind programming.
just in the last year either. It's several years going
Is
on.
it positive mind programming or negative mind programming? That's the question that it comes down to. Everybody can make their own decision. But I think mind programming, as a general rule, is not good unless you self-define as a kind of slave who can't think for yourself. Well, then go for the programming. Just absorb it.
Everything is always about infusing values. The question is which values.
Do people not have their own values that they can form themselves?
The creators of anything like that at any given time in history are infusing their ideas and values.
Yeah.
Even if they're what everyone knows or common sense, whatever it's thought of at the time.
There's a marketplace for values, and you select which ones you want, right? And people who are purveying values.
Well, it only became an open marketplace when something cracked in initially.
The internet. The internet ramped it up big time, yeah.
It's hard to say, but do you remember those stats we looked at the incidence of the uses of certain key terms in the identity politics narrative? White supremacy, white privilege.
All that, yeah.
A whole bunch of words they selected. They all explode at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, between 2011 and 2014.
The very fact that you look for that, or you're able to look for that data on the internet suggests that it's coming through the internet. I mean, at least to that at that level, that kind of information and those values, quote unquote, are coming through the internet. It was much harder longer, before the internet for that kind of widespread value seeding to happen, and to be taken up by a large number of people. It was the mainstream media that did it, and TV and all that kind of stuff. But now it's like everybody.
Well, how did Hitler do it?
Well, he did it in one country. Now it's
Yeah.
global. That's the problem. Right now it's global, I mean, beforehand, when shit like this would go down, you'd see one country going down the tubes, and you could stand back and go, well, poor them.
Mhm.
They're having a bad time. They've got a nutbag for a leader. Now it's like global. It's everybody, all at once, all the time. So there's no sense of being immune to it, even though, well, you can be immune to it, but there's a sense of it, of that pressure, as one of the parents of a vaccinated kid who got seriously ill said, actually died, I think, in that case, that there was massive pressure on her. Of course, it filters down into society where neighbours and all that kind of stuff will be the vehicles of that pressure at the local level. But where do they get it from? They get it from the media, and they get it from, and it depends on the person, but there's way more people, a lot more people these days are hooked into that because of the internet, especially younger people. Do you remember watching the news much when you were 15? Pretend you're the average person. Pretend you were the average 15-year-old.
That's the right answer here.
Pretend you're the average 15-year-old.
Not much.
Right, exactly.
No,
You didn't go and sit in front of the news and that kind of stuff. But kids today, 15 years old, are getting exposed to that through fucking Big Bird.
Right.
And cartoon characters. You know what I mean? Of course, that could have been done through the TV and stuff as well. But the whole plague of cell phones and tablets and all that kind of stuff, and kids with their faces stuck to them. They're getting far more of those kind of quote unquote values shoved down their throats through the appropriate means than they ever were when we were growing up, when there was no internet. I mean, I got my values from being out, lighting fires and stuff like that. Not lighting fires, but lighting.
He said it now.
Campfires.
Campfires. Oh, singing songs around the campfire,
and hearing stories and stuff like that. Do you know
Nothing
what I
to
mean?
do with
Going
fireworks
swimming.
and letterboxes.
No. Nothing.
Sure.
Nothing to do with launching fireworks at police cars or anything like that. But they're values in themselves, and I tell you what, they're a lot better values than in that context. They're a lot better values than the values that kids get today.
So what you're saying is kill the internet.
Well, I've said that before, but too late.
Yeah,
It's done.
we did a show on that a few years ago.
Burn the internet.
Look what happened since.
Yeah,
a lot of people are terrified of the internet. They do need the internet to break down, or something.
It's not
or
good.
to get
At
a
this
break.
point, it's not
Do you
good.
know what? A lot of people commented on how healthy it was to get a break from the rat race.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on their job type and what they could or couldn't do, a lot of people found
You mean
psychological
lockdowns?
relief from at least the first lockdown.
Yeah, but for a period of time.
Yes. It also
But it
had
got old
adverse
after a while.
adverse ones overtook any positive ones
Yeah,
in
so
the
it
end
went
for
on.
most people. It's definitely the same case for can be made for a break in internet.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
connection.
Yeah.
Just break them and see how many spells go.
Yeah,
it can come back, but give it a few months and.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we even want it at this point? It's just a few words from Bojo. It was actually, I think it was last Sunday. It's just that we were airing while day one was underway. Again, it's just more of the doomsday rhetoric. Here, I'll give it to Scotty. It's just 44 seconds from his speech. It's worth playing it because we know that Boris Johnson knows better than this. He knows this is BS, what he's saying. As we speculated last week, there must be some freaking reason why they say it anyway. Other than, being told they have to say it. Let's have a listen.
We are in roughly the same position, my fellow global leaders, as James Bond today. Except that the tragedy is, this is not a movie. And the doomsday device is real. And the clock is ticking to the furious rhythm of hundreds of billions of pistons and turbines and furnaces and engines with which we are pumping carbon into the air faster and faster, record outputs, and quilting the earth in an invisible and suffocating blanket of CO2.
That's not true. That's observably not true. Quilting the earth. Okay, now, anecdotally, when the first lockdown went into play last year, city pollution almost certainly did plummet. You know,
Yeah.
people experienced it, and some satellite imagery showed that to be the case. And okay, so that's true, right? This is the thing. When it comes to that plank of the whole AGW model, they've always got that. That's plausible. It's true. Pollution, parts of it's invisible, some of it's visible, smog, detectable. Pollution is a thing, and it is a problem with so many people on the planet. But the key linchpin in their AGW model is that the next cog in the wheel is carbon dioxide emissions and or methane and others, but carbon dioxide is the one they focus on most. Carbon dioxide did not skip a beat. It continued to go like this March, April, May 2020.
Yeah. So
there was no hiccup down.
Nothing to do with humans. I mean, very, very little to do with humans. That's the big lie in the climate change scenario. But as Boris was saying that, you just put up that link, Scotty, as Boris was saying that this was going on in the UK. Plan for a UK coal mine.
Ha.
Open a new coal mine in the UK.
And it'll look like that too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, and again, it's a joke, you know. I mean, like we've said in previous shows, it's a joke. China, the producer for the world of all and everything, basically, is
about a third of the world's stuff.
60% of its energy sources come from coal. Of its energy source comes from coal. So, yeah, just stop China using coal and everything will be fine.
We're all hypocrites, is what you're saying.
No, no, only
no. But if we were to be on board with them, we would all be hypocrites.
Yeah, of course.
And
yeah.
we would flagellate ourselves further.
Yeah, it's ridiculous
if we believe what their premises. We saw it only after the fact, but in early October, 40 leaders of religions in a formal or informal capacity met at the Vatican. I guess he was the chief honcho of them. Pope Francis and 40 faith leaders call for urgent action to combat climate change. Future generations will never forgive us. And the president of the COP event was there to receive the statement signed by the 40 and then presented at COP last week in Glasgow. And we watched it, right? It was the same kind of blend of politics with some science, with a lot more eschatological type stuff. Like, the future generations will never forgive us.
Yeah, well, that's manipulative.
I don't understand it. Why do they feel? I suppose it has its own propulsion at this point. If they don't agree to an invitation, they risk being cancelled in some respect, no matter where in the world they are, I suppose.
Yeah, there's some higher power, yeah.
Anyway, we won't bother to put that up, but it got me questioning, what are they going to agree to, at least on paper, at COP?
Yeah. Well, they're just what they've already said, which is reduce carbon output between now and 2030 by X number of percentage. We're going to, and that means we're going to shut down parts of our industry. We're going to shut down parts of our agricultural system, agricultural production, and people are going to starve. And
they leave that part out, though.
Yeah, well, they don't mention that. That's in the footnotes. Y'all are going to starve. The whole we're in this together. That's the thing that gets that combines or that unites COVID and the pandemic and the global warming is the idea, the messaging that we're all in this together. There's a shared problem, and it's governments are saying that. It's governments who sit above everybody else, at least in their estimation. They're the ones who are trying to tell us that the great unwashed, that we're all in this together with them, right? We're all hermanos, we're all in this together. It's actually a term called a guy, Gavin de Becker, He's an American kind of, what is he? He's an author and security specialist, whatever, in the US. He coined the term forced teaming. He said it's when a person implies that they have something in common with their chosen victim, acting as if they have a shared predicament when that isn't really true. If a person is lying, they will add excessive details to make themselves sound more credible to their chosen victim. Yeah, that pretty much sums up what's been going on for the past, over this entire climate change, anthropogenic global warming. We're all in this together. COVID, we're all in this together. We all need to get behind it and do our part. And that's one thing you hear from people a lot, ordinary people who wouldn't necessarily be party to the kind of things that or the perspective that we have, say that they felt that they were coerced or manipulated, or, well, they don't necessarily say they were coerced or manipulated, but they felt that they were encouraged to go along with everything that has happened, and they're also feeling encouraged to go along with all of the climate change business in order to do it as a team effort. We're all in this together. Play your part. Be a good citizen. This is the only society we have. We all have to play our part in doing, and it's all the stuff that you're being encouraged to do and to engage in is coming from people who are not part of your society, effectively, because politicians are really not part of society. They don't view the world and view society in the same way ordinary people view society. So it's a false manipulative tactic, clearly, by definition, for governments to turn around to the people and say, we're all in this together, let's all play our part. We all have a common aim, a common goal, we all have a common investment or common
future, when
that's not the way they see themselves or society.
Yeah,
and
we don't have a common
to society.
present, for God's sake. We don't have a common present. They live in, effectively, the wealthiest of them anyway, in a breakaway civilization.
Yeah,
they don't share the same civilization as the rest of us. They haven't worn masks on their private jet. They have had no interruptions as they zip around the world, not just to this conference, but everywhere else. They've been flying in and out of Australia and New Zealand, no problem.
And nobody else could, yeah.
They're not part of the civilization.
They're not part of the rabble, for sure. So yeah, you're being manipulated is the bottom line, and if you can't see it, well then, tough shit. It's a dangerous position to be in, to be in a position where you are being manipulated, and you don't see it, and you yourself, like I was saying earlier on, engage in all sorts of mental gymnastics to make that square peg fit the round hole, so that you can feel more comfortable, so that you can reduce your levels of anxiety that are coming from unconscious perception that something's not right about the situation, but you can't put your finger on it and you won't go there. So you come up with a plausible narrative in order to reduce your levels of anxiety that are an accurate reflection of what's actually going on, but you're essentially bullshitting yourself in order to calm yourself down. But you're setting yourself up in that way, probably or potentially, given the situation, you're setting yourself up for a big fall in the future when it all comes crashing down, when it all comes too much to cover up, and all at once you have to face the fact that you've been denying and lying to yourself for so long, and suddenly the reality intrudes, and boom, what are you going to do? You haven't prepared yourself, even just psychologically or emotionally, in order to deal with that, let alone the physical manifestations of something that can go quite wrong as a result of you playing along with a narrative that does not reflect what is actually happening on the ground, how that manifests. There's scenarios. We can't predict what the scenarios will actually be where people will be in those kind of difficulties, but one that's very common is like where you believe about, for example, in terms of the supply chain crisis. You say the government says it'll all be fine if we just get vaccinated. It's all going to be fine. It'll all work itself out by the middle of next year, 2022. Everything will be okay. So you just go along with that narrative. You don't look at what's actually happening and look at the global context and the overall situation, and you don't prepare yourself in any way. And then all of a sudden, boom, like from one day to the next, almost suddenly there really is no food in the supermarket. There are no essential supplies that you need. And you find yourself in a big city as one of maybe a few million people all rushing down to the local stores to do a Black Friday on each other, beat the heads of each other to try and get the last supplies. That's one example of the kind of scenario that, you know, can and has obviously in the past manifested in these situations. And that's the kind of thing that you need to, that's the payoff you get of not finding yourself in that situation. If you take the pain now of facing into the reality and accepting the unpleasant reality rather than the comfortable narrative, and go through that pain in advance in a certain sense, go through that pain in advance of facing into reality, so that you don't find yourself in a difficult position all at once where the floodgates open type thing, where it all hits you at once, you know. So this is what we try to convince people or convey to people, that this is what's happening, this is what probably will happen in the relatively near future, and you need to, at the very least, be psychologically and emotionally prepared for it. If you're not, you're in trouble. Because your mental state in those situations dictates your actions, you know. And if it's a shock to you, if it's too big of a shock to you, you'll be, you know, you won't do the right thing. You won't be thinking straight, so you won't act in the appropriate way. You won't read the situation. You won't have been watching the situation, and you therefore won't read the situation when it happens all at once. You'd be confused, dazed and confused, basically, and more likely to engage in
wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Yeah, stupid actions, you know, that just make things worse. Anyway, what time is it? 5:30. I think we've said enough for today. It's pretty much, you know, similar to what we've been saying over the past few weeks, but obviously with details. We're just charting the situation as it moves along here, keeping you up to date on the important topics and where we're at. We don't have a crystal ball, although we, you know, like to look into a metaphorical one now and again. But it's getting clearer and clearer as time passes that...
Well, that's one of the payoffs of paying attention.
Yeah, for sure.
To the present.
Being able to.
As it is, because you can...
To some extent.
Fairly well...
Yeah, you can...
Prognosticate.
In general terms, you can predict...
You can be not shocked when things happen.
Right, for sure, yeah. Oh, the shock
and
is
respond calmly.
The shock is much reduced, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll just keep doing that until the fat lady sings, if she is ever going to. Please sing soon. This is getting interminable. But anyway, so we hope you stay with us, and we thank our watchers and listeners and whatever you're doing.
Our commenters.
And our commenters, of course, because commenting is awesome. Don't forget to smash all the buttons, like everything, subscribe to everything. I mean, on this page, on this YouTube page, and we'll be back next week with another show on whatever madness has further beset the world at that point in time. So until then, have a good week, everybody. Stay safe and keep the faith.
See you next week.
Bye.
Can't stop the signal now.